again, and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm your host, Kim Todd, and we're glad to be back in the studio after our special program from Lauritz and Gardens last week, including a snake. We've got another great show for you, but first let me introduce tonight's expert panel from Nebraska Extension and Landscape Services. We have Michael Rethwish answering all of our insect questions.
Hello, Kim.
Turf and weed questions, Rock Gassois.
Evening, Kim.
Taking up the pathology chair, we have Jeff Culbertson. We're going to see if we can stump that chump tonight.
Good luck.
And Elizabeth Killinger is going to answer our horticulture questions.
Hi, Kim.
You know, we'd love for you to join us as well. Give us a call at 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Our toll-free number is 1-800-676-5446. Pictures and emails, go to byf@unl.edu. You have to send the pictures to that email address. We answer those on a future show. When you do send us those emails, give us as much information as you can, including where you live. Don't forget to follow us during the week on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and the Backyard Farmer website. So let's take a look at some samples. And Michael, I know you need to have some zooming in on whatever you've got tonight.
Yes, we have a series of leaves tonight, and you can see it's not quite all there on these leaves. Part of it is missing. And here we've got some lamb's quarter. We've got, on this leaf, we've got some, this is a hackberry. You can see there's kind of a line through that. And here's another hackberry with part of the leaf being gone. And then we have the cause of these things. And what's happening, we've got different things happening on the different leaves. These are all larval stages of insects. Some are beetles, some are flies, and some are moths and caterpillars. On this particular leaf, this actually is one that's caused by a leaf miner. And these leaf miners can also go on vegetables. And if you can see real closely, you can see these little small stipples there. And that's where the leaf miner adult, she turns around, she uses her ovipositor to sample the leaf and either turn around and feed or lay an egg. And then when the egg hatches, you can see the tunneling from the leaf miner. They usually fall out of the leaf, burrow their way out, go down to the ground to pupate. So.
All right, and not much you can do about it.
Nope.
Other than just look.
Yep.
All right, Rock, your sample is about as big as our table tonight.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. This is goosegrass. It's an annual, summer annual, and it's like crabgrass or other things. But if left unattended, it can get quite large. If you look at, it's almost as large as my shirt. Oh, not quite that large, but anyway, it's the thing I wanted to show is that number one, it's got this really characteristic white center, which is very typical of goosegrass, and also some people call it zipper-like. I think it looks more like a goosefoot, but anyway, it's a fairly characteristic seed head. But now it's too big to treat. It's too late in the season. So what do we want to do? Well, this is a weed that loves compacted soils. So if you do anything, and this happened to be in a landscape bed, but if you do anything to cultivate that up or get some air in there, it's probably going to struggle a little bit more. The other thing is in the landscape bed, it needs light to germinate. So if you put a nice, good 2 to 3.5 inch thick mulch layer onto that, keeping it away from the base of the trees, that'll go a long way into controlling it. Doing anything now is just a waste of time. The seed is mature, it's starting to drop. Spraying it, you could turn it brown, but you're not going to do much. But it's loves compacted soils and needs light to germinate. So keep that in mind when you're trying to control it next year.
Did you say annual or perennial?
Annual. It's an annual.
Okay.
Summer annual. It germinates about a week, 2 weeks later than crabgrass. Needs a soil temp of about 62 degrees.
All right, thanks, Rock. Okay, Jeff, pathology.
I worked pretty hard on this sample. Actually, it was in my backyard. What I have here is some honeysuckle vine, and as you can see, there's some powdery white mildew on these leaves. And so we're seeing this on a lot of our shrubs right now, and our vines. With our higher humidities, warmer temps, maybe a little bit less in the way of air movement, we're going to see powdery mildew show up on a lot of different plants. So it's important not to panic. The big thing with this is sanitation, cleaning up those leaves, getting them out of there so that we're not reinfecting the plant over and over again. You may need to do some pruning. Think about that in the spring next year. If it's, Elizabeth was talking about lilac or something like that, maybe cane something out to get some more air movement in the plant for the future. So something that we're seeing right now. It's not a big deal, and it probably comes every year once the humidity gets up there, dew points are up, and that sort of thing.
I think a lot of people feel like they're mildewing too with
Yeah.
these dew points. All right, Elizabeth, something a little bit unusual tonight.
Something a little bit unusual, and especially I did not grab it from by Grand Island. I had to wait till I got to Lincoln here. But what it is it's a hardy crepe myrtle. There's some selections, the Philly Pink, the Philly Red, and the Philly Coral. They were bred by the Fleming brothers. And what it is it's a shorter type of crepe myrtle that's supposedly hardy for here in Lincoln. And I say supposedly because I only know of the one spot by the dairy store on campus that I borrowed it from. And Jeff said it's okay because he's right
taking it
next to
back?
I'm taking it back. And so it's pretty, it's gorgeous. It's not the same as the crepe myrtles down south. It's a lot shorter, but it gives that wow type of a color, a little bit different type of appearance to that flower. So it's one of those that if you want to be daring and you want to try to grow it and you live here in Lincoln or Omaha, you might be able to try to grow it. But we were talking off air that it might be a little bit hard to find in the trade, so that's something to keep in
Sounds like you
mind.
can just get it on campus and take it off.
I don't know if they'd like that so much,
As long as
but
you're just borrowing
as
it.
long as you're borrowing it, Jeff's fine with it. But it is one that's a little bit different, and if you wanted to try it out, it's something fun and difficult to try.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. All right, Michael, we're going to go to you with our first picture question. This is a viewer that has a beautiful hibiscus, but she says for the past 3 years they've been eaten by those little beastie beetles inside. They want to know what kind of beasties they are and whether they should spray the buds with an insecticide before they open, or are there other options to keep this from happening?
Okay, the insect that we have pictured here is the spotted cucumber beetle, and it's related to the other corn rootworm beetles we see, but it comes out a little bit later. As far as actually controlling the insect by spraying the blossom, I would not recommend that. They have a very large host range, feed on lots of different types of plants, and spraying the flower is going to be detrimental when bees and things like that come. Maybe they can find something that's going to be a little bit more, maybe a trap crop that's going to be a little bit more attractive and spray that, but I would not recommend spraying the blossoms because you're going to kill the bees and things that come to visit the pollen there.
So they could have perhaps a cucumber beetle picking party
Well,
or
or
flicking.
more of a trap crop maybe. There are some in the past. There have been some traps available with insecticides, but I'm not sure that they're on the market anymore.
All right, thanks, Michael. Okay, Rock, this is a viewer in Ord who has issues in the turf. And for a minute there, I thought perhaps they had painted it green for the St. Patrick's Day.
That would be O'Neill.
They have appeared the last couple years. They've owned the property 5 years. The land was irrigated farmland. Darker lines appear healthy, and they're wondering what this is.
This is classical fairy ring. And it looks like a relatively younger lawn, 5 years. And so usually you see, I usually see it in an older yard and it grows on the organic matter that's left behind the rotting roots of a tree or something like that. But what's interesting is that in this particular case, you don't see a whole lot of tree growth, but that doesn't mean that there isn't organic matter in there, because it can feed on thatch and it can feed on crop residue that was left behind from the previous cropping seasons. Even 5 years ago, if a corn crown can live 3-4 years if it's covered up and isn't exposed to air. So you throw that into the equation, it's definitely fairy ring. It's interesting, they'll see those rings, and when they start to grow together, they'll antagonize each other. And Dave Wysong and John Watkins say I'm totally full of it when I say this, but you can pull plugs from one and transfer it to the other. And I did that in a couple of fairy rings in my backyard, and I'm not sure that it did anything, but it was fun digging up the fairy rings and throwing them out there. And it's just excess nitrogen that's causing that greening. But right now I just let it grow out, let it do its piece. Take a look at it, see if it's really thatchy, and consider maybe a core aerification this fall.
All right, thank you, Rock. Okay, Jeff, this viewer sent us a great picture of this particular fungus.
Okay.
She doesn't know what they are, but they're in her flower beds, and they're little, and then she sees this white, gooey, eggy sort of thing at the base of it, which I think is what really caught her attention.
Sure.
What is it? And
That's a stinkhorn fungus. And so they're fairly common. They're something that you would see farther south, but many times I think she talked about some new mulch. And soil, mulch, that sort of thing will move that around. So it probably the spores were in the mulch that she brought up and or put on her yard, and so that's what's going on there. So
and occasionally people will send us a picture of just that underground structure and think they've discovered snake eggs.
right, yeah.
All right, Elizabeth, a couple of people sent in questions about eggplant this year. And Black Beauty, and some have regular fruit, and then a couple of them have eggplants that are doing this, that the leaves look a little funky, and then they're green, and then they go yellow. What's going on with that?
The green one that we're looking at now, more than likely, it's one of the green cultivars that are on the market. There's one called Apple Green. There's one called Little Green. Even though the tag might have said that they were planting a Black Beauty or an Ikebana or one of the purple ones, there's the possibility that they got the green one. Now, right now, I would say that green one was probably ripe. When they get overripe, that's when we start to see them start to turn that yellow color. That goes for the purple ones too. So if your purple one gets overripe or it gets sunburnt, that's when it starts to get that yellowish tint to it. So they have a green eggplant. Yep, just pick it before it turns yellow.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Well, a backyard cookout isn't complete without a few steaming ears of yellow sweet corn. But if your corn is looking like something out of a monster movie, you might be able to eat it anyway. A common issue with sweet corn is corn smut, and here's Tamara Jackson Zims to tell us more.
Many of the same corn diseases that affect our farmers' fields are also going to cause problems with sweet corn. Fortunately, though, because we harvest sweet corn as a fresh crop, we harvest it earlier, and so most of those diseases do not have a big impact on the way we use our sweet corn for table use. However, there is one disease in particular that a lot of our gardeners note. It's more of an oddity than it is a problem, and it's called common smut or just corn smut. And so our gardeners may first notice that this disease may look like tumors or even mushrooms. And those are galls actually caused by the fungus growing in the sweet corn. And this particular fungus causes an excessive growth in the cells that it infects. Well, this fungus actually survives over winters in the soil. And so every year you can have the potential for having a reinfection. And so the fungus may infect through the silks and infect ears, and that's when it's probably the most recognizable. But it can actually infect any part of the plant, whether it's on the leaves or the stalk, or like I mentioned, on the ears themselves. As these galls expand and they mature, they'll develop a papery covering over them, and large quantities of very tiny black dust-like spores are produced inside. And so that's what's going to overwinter in the soil. Well, this is also going to make a mess of things for you as you begin to use this product. And so this is what people find undesirable, but actually it doesn't harm the corn that you're going to eat. And so as far as management and what to do about it, if you see these galls developing on your plants in the garden, don't worry about making a fungicide application. That's really not going to help because this is a local infection. And so when you take these ears inside after you harvest them, simply trim off that affected part of the ear and get it out of the way if you don't want to eat that. And so for future years, if you find that this is a common problem for you, you can always switch varieties using more resistant varieties of sweet corn. Sweet corn tends to be more susceptible than field corn, and so you may see it more commonly than a lot of our farmers. Finally, if you're not bothered by this and you want to try something new, you can actually eat these galls. Many people in Mexico eat them as a delicacy, and it's called huitlacoche. And you can look up recipes on how to use it, and it's becoming increasingly common in our American cuisine in some of our finer restaurants. So you may find recipes for corn truffles or Mexican corn truffles.
I'm not sure I have the courage to eat that, but I know a few years ago, Rock, you took a big old bite right here on air.
And I was taller then.
So that proves what happens when you eat it.
I loved them. I love corn spite. It's really good.
All right. Michael, you get the next picture question. This viewer, we don't know where she's from, but she has a picture of an Asian wheel bug. And she says he's pretty darn intimidating. She wants to know whether they bite humans and are they dangerous?
I don't know if there's such a thing as an Asian wheel bug, but there's definitely a wheel bug, and it gets its name from that pronotum with the part that goes over the top there. It looks like little cogs. And actually, we've got a relative of it right here on the table.
The little green thing?
Yeah, and it's actually in a type. Actually in a type of assassin bug.
Yeah.
And these are really beneficial because they feed on other insects. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to get that on the screen here. It's just a little bit too small. If you let them bite you, they do have a pretty good bite. They're related to things called blood-sucking cone noses, which in parts of the southwestern U.S. and Central America can actually transmit diseases to people because they will bite you on the lips at night. But the wheel bug, for the most part, doesn't bother humans unless you're, handling it.
And a name like blood-sucking cone noses.
Yeah, but
It doesn't get more descriptive than that.
But we had that was a wheel bug.
All right. thank
While you were
Michael.
talking, Dan, that one of our camera people zoomed in really, really close. It was sweet. Nice.
okay,
nice,
good.
nice work,
Word,
Dan.
Okay.
There you go. All right, Rock. This is an Imperial viewer. And she has little evergreens that keep sprouting in her front yard. They've only owned the property a year. Hundreds of them coming up, and of course it makes it miserable to walk without your shoes on. They've tried spraying. Nothing seems to cure the problem. They just pulled them all summer long. What are they and what can they do?
These are cedar seedlings, and there's a reason that this thing is next to impossible to get rid of out on the range and prairie. It's taken over huge expanses of what used to be very productive range ground. But in the yard, there's a couple of things. Spraying it doesn't really do much unless you mow first and then spray it with 2,4-D. You'll get some control, or at the very least suppression. They can pull them a lot. I mean, they'll be pulling them, for a while. So I'm not sure pulling them really works is all that effective. But mowing does not control them. They branch out and they start smothering the lawn, and so you're gonna have to find some way to get them out. If you're not gonna hand pull them, then mow. And I don't mean mow the whole yard and then wait a couple hours and go out and spray. I mean have somebody walking behind you, because it's that cut stem that the 2,4-D has to get into contact with to be very effective. Now, 2,4-D and Roundup works amazing on it, but then the lawn's pretty much gone. So let's not be doing that. But 2,4-D by itself, or any of some of the broadleaf herbicides, right after it's been cut, can give you some suppression and a little bit of control.
All right, on a very non-windy day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with no vines around like wine vines or tomatoes.
Good.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Okay. Jeff, speaking of vines, this viewer has a clematis.
Okay.
She has splotches on the leaves. She says they're not all splotched, and the plants did flower. So we had kind of a discussion on what this might be.
Yeah, clematis are susceptible to a few different diseases, but the one thing you suggested might be that it might be a magnesium deficiency in the soil. So, there's a couple things. If the plant, it looks like these are lower leaves as well. And clematis, again, benefits from kind of cleaning out and making sure that there's good air movement. And so that's what I would suggest, is cleaning out the plant, making sure we get some of the dead canes out of that. And, I don't know if I'd worry about it. Make sure that the plants are mulched, that they're receiving enough water, especially now that it's gotten dry, that you're continuing to water the plants occasionally. So.
I think we've seen maybe a little bit of that on your collection on campus
Yeah.
once in a while too, and they're still fine.
Right.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jeff. Elizabeth, fine line buckthorn, which is one of those beautiful screening plants. Oops, looks like this, winter kill. This viewer is wondering whether she can or should prune out those dead areas and whether she can expect them to grow back. And any advice you could give her on how to prune that?
Fine line buckthorn is one of those that it's hardy for a while, but it takes the right environment for it to, we saw some winter kill in a lot of shrubs, and this is one of the ones we saw it in. The best advice at this point in time is to go ahead and prune out the dead only. And then it's not going to give you that uniform appearance because some of them were dead down to a third or some of them only had a few sections. But hopefully this winter's not going to be quite as tough on them. So they could have a chance to at least recover a little bit. But like I said, you're not going to have that perfect screen pyramid shape probably for a long, long time.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Well, we all love a little savory basil in our Italian dishes, and our basil is growing like crazy out at the Backyard Farmer Garden this year. It can get a little bit woody and taste kind of funny when it's past its prime. For this week's Green and Growing Tip, Terry James gives us some ideas on how to store it properly so you can harvest it and use it this fall and winter.
We're looking at a bumper crop of basil this year, so we're going to preserve it so we can use it this winter and remember our garden. There's two different ways that you can preserve basil. You can either dry it or you can freeze it. If you dry it, you don't dry it on the stem. Take the leaves off the stem, lay them on a piece of paper, and just let them air dry naturally. And then preserve them in a Ziploc bag in the cupboard. They'll last, a few months, at least get you through Christmas. You can also freeze it. If you're going to freeze it, again, take it off of the stems, blend it in the blender with some water, pour it in some ice cube trays, and freeze it. When it's frozen, pop it out of the ice cube trays, put it in a Ziploc. You can keep it in your freezer all winter long, throw it in that marinara sauce, and you'll have fresh basil for your spaghetti sauce in January and February.
So instead of just cutting them out and throwing them away, there are a couple of good options to have that basil taste good all year long. And I think one of the things that it can do is turn kind of black. So just like shut your eyes and put it in the sauce. Okay, Michael, this is a Norfolk viewer that wonders about grub control in the lawn, and the question is, what is the main ingredient a homeowner should look for if they're wanting grub control?
Probably the most widely used thing that is effective out there is a systemic. It has imidacloprid in it as the active ingredient, and it's spelled IMI. Starts with IMI. It's about the only thing out there with IMI as an insecticide. So it's imidacloprid is the active ingredient they're looking for.
All right, thank you. Rock, this is a Loop City viewer, and they're wondering why the lawn on the south side of trees is turning brown, but the north side is perfectly green. Seems like showing up all over in that part of the state.
It's just, the south side of anything, it's normally warmer, and my guess is that it's showing drought stress earlier. If you didn't irrigate or if it didn't rain, then I would think the north side would start showing it as well. But it always intrigued me in the mountains of New Mexico to see the south side of a hill versus the north side, and the vegetation changes. And so it's just, it's just strictly an environmental thing. And in my yard, I have it set so that the south side of the things that are shaded or not, from the tree on the south side, because it's trees using water as well. They get a little bit more water and get it more frequently.
All right, thank you, Rock. Jeff, this is a viewer that has a full-grown river birch. At the base of one of the three trunks, he says there is a round, softball-sized black weeping spot. Any idea what that might be and how to treat it?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Elizabeth, any ideas? No? Okay.
Fungal?
Rot.
A rot? A picture. We need a picture.
I would say that it is a rot.
Yeah.
And on that stem, especially if it's a multi-stem tree and with a birch,
Right.
I would worry about the integrity of the tree. So if it's that big, my one suggestion would be, if it was my tree, I would go and try to clean some of that out and just see how big a hole we have there. And if it's very big, and there's targets, kids, sidewalks, cars, houses, then I think I'd take that stem off.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Elizabeth, we have a Lincoln viewer who wonders about hibiscus, and it has apparently seeded into some cracks in the sidewalk or driveway, and they're wondering when they can be moved.
I wouldn't do it right now. Your best bet is probably you're going to have to move it this fall, because if you leave it in the sidewalk for this winter, it's probably going to die and you're probably going to get winter kill. So a little bit later in this fall, if you want to try to pull it up, go ahead and try to pull it up. If it was me, I'd try to put it in a pot first, and then you can put the pot in the garage and overwinter it there and then put it out in the spring, just to try it that way. If it's seeding itself, you probably can collect the seeds from this year's and try again in a pot. But if you really wanted to try that seedling, I'd try it in a pot and then try to overwinter it that way.
Okay, good idea. Thanks. Our garden has really been a thing of beauty this growing season, but like everything else, not everything has turned out like we thought it would. Before we go to break, let's visit the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're not really gardening, but we are looking. We're looking at what did good, what did not do so good, and we're taking some notes for what we're gonna do next year. We've noticed that the Bossa Nova zucchini did not do quite as well this year as it did last year. We're not seeing as many fruits as we did last year. Not for sure if that was because of the weather, if we got it planted too late or what. So a little disappointed in that. We're also looking at the broccoli artwork, which was a new All-America Selection winner this year. Didn't really do what we thought it would do. It had the big center flower in the center, but when we cut it out, we didn't really get those side shoots like they thought we would. We're taking notes. We're seeing what worked, what didn't work, so we can improve our garden for next year. So that's what's happening in the Backyard Farmer Garden this week.
We need to take a short break. Stay with us. We've got the plant of the week and the lightning round coming up right after these messages. Welcome back to Backyard Farmer, and thanks to Gary Stone for a couple of those beautiful shots from Scotts Bluff. You still have time to get your questions answered. Just give us a call at 1-800-676-5446. Later on in the show, we'll check out the new trees out at Raising Nebraska in Grand Island. Right now, it's time to start that lightning round. Are you ready, Elizabeth?
I'm ready.
Okay. What are the black spheres in the leaf axils of tiger lilies?
Bulblets, and they're like a seed, so you can plant them.
Excellent. Would shredded paper mulch hurt a garden or help it?
It doesn't work. The weeds grow right up through it. Personal experience.
All right, we have lots of viewers with curling leaves on tomatoes and they're not setting fruit.
The curling leaves could be herbicide injury from a product like 2,4-D. Not setting fruit because it could be too hot out because we've been really, really hot.
All right, morning glories are not blooming. What's up with that?
It's the year. Just wait.
Okay. Why would the cultivar of Russian sage called Lacy Blue be flopping?
You know, a lot of those could be flopping because they're getting too much moisture. I have a cat or a dog that would probably lay in them too. So those are some of the options that could be causing it to flop.
All right, is it time to divide irises?
Yes, July is your time to move your iris and cut them back and go ahead and spread them out.
Excellent. And rhubarb, move now or move in the spring?
Move in the spring, why not? That doesn't count. So
Whatever you said was going to be right, right?
right.
All right, this is it, Jeff.
Okay, I know watching those guys all these years. Yes, yes, no.
Pass.
Pass. Pass.
All right, what causes an elm to leak and what can you do about it?
What causes an elm to leak and what can you do about it? I would guess that it's maybe just going through transpiration if it's just getting hot and that sort of thing. So I don't know if I would worry about it.
All right, we have hosta leaves yellowing and they've been mulched with a weed barrier. Is that disease or?
Well, it could be, and it could be that the roots are too wet. especially with the moisture that the weed barrier is holding in too much moisture. We're getting maybe some crown rot or something like that going on. So I would say pull that weed barrier off. You don't need to have weed barrier on your perennials.
Okay. A maple with sudden death. Any chance it might be verticillium wilt?
I suppose it could be. I mean, there's a lot of chances. So, or with maples in particular, I think this is Japanese maple. So there's a couple of things that could be affecting it, and certainly our climate, our winters can have. We've had some tough winters on our Japanese maple in the eastern part of the state. So.
Okay. Little bitty white spots on redbud bark after a rain.
On the bark? Okay. Yeah, I don't know if it's lichens or something like that, but I don't know if I would worry about it. If we're not seeing a decline in the tree, I wouldn't sweat it.
Okay.
Jeff, you do understand the idea is to answer a lot of questions.
I want to do it thoroughly.
Okay.
People deserve it.
It's called the lightning round. It's not called the slow crawl round.
And on that note,
Yeah, now I'm in the hot seat right now. Oops.
okay, what is the best herbicide for crabgrass control, and when should it be applied?
Any of the pre-emergent products that contain pendimethalin or prodiamine or dithiopure work well, and they should be no earlier than the first week in May in eastern Nebraska and about a week later in western.
All right. Can you use Roundup in the mulch at the base of trees without hurting the trees or shrubs?
It doesn't move Roundup does not move very readily in bark and woody tissue, so you're pretty safe. I spray my suckers on a crabapple all the time with Roundup, but I'm not going to say that you want to just do it, every day. Just, do it a couple times a year. Let's not overdo it.
All right. Is there anything you can spray for weeds in the driveway right now without causing damage to the surrounding landscape?
I wouldn't be messing with herbicides right now at all.
Okay. Is it okay to aerate right now if you're going to seed in a couple of weeks?
It's too hot, and I would, if you're going to wait until it cools off a little bit, then go ahead and aerate right before you put the seed. It doesn't have to be now.
All right. Is there a good pre-emergent for nutsedge in the lawn?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't get it. Yes, no. Your fifth one was a no.
All right, Michael, you're last.
I have to
but
follow this, right?
You have to follow that.
Okay.
We have a viewer who wondered whether the 17-year cicadas were only around in June. Are they done?
Well, they're around for 17 years, just above ground for a few weeks of the year. But in eastern Nebraska, they're around all year, all 17 years worth.
Okay. Is there any such thing as a green June beetle?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Are the monarchs finished eating the milkweeds so that they can be cut down for the winter?
No.
Okay. West Nile has been confirmed in several spots in Nebraska. Should people be thinking about spraying their yards?
For West Nile?
For the mosquitoes.
For the
Nice
mosquitoes?
try.
They can think about it, but I don't know if it's going to be how effective it is. It all depends if the virus is present in the mosquitoes.
Okay. Lightning bugs, what are they doing when they're not lightninging?
Before they become adults, the larval stages feed on land snails or grass snails.
Really?
Yes.
Huh. What are the red sucking insects on sunflowers right now? Little bitty ones, little tiny ones.
On sunflowers? I'm assuming it's a type of aphid, but I'm just guessing.
I think you're probably right. Nice job. All right, Elizabeth, what has Gladys shared with us today?
Gladys has shared with us a few of the ones. The pink one is a vine called Mandevilla. With the Mandevilla, it's not hardy throughout the winter here, but it can get very tall. It can twirl itself around a vertical element, so that's something that's kind of fun. The thing to keep in mind with the Mandevilla is it produces a sap, like a milky type of a sap, and some people, it can irritate their skin. Also, if you have little ones running around, or maybe if Rock gets hungry, if they eat it, what it can do is it can cause some stomach upset. So that's something to keep in mind if you have pets that like to chew on things, maybe steer clear of this, not that Rock's a pet, but it requires that full sun. The other one that we have here, the yellow one, is the coneflowers. And there's several different types of coneflowers. There's the annual coneflower, and then there's the perennial coneflower. And so some of the annual ones have some of the pretty colors on it. This one's actually like a double, and it's got the two colors on it. Some of these other ones are single, and they've got the two colors on it. I have some in my yard, and it's a native, so I just let it do its thing and spread its seeds. But it can get up to 4 foot tall. The thing to keep in mind with these is some insects like to use them as a food source, and so sometimes the leaves get a little ratty and tatty and full of insect holes, but since Fred's not here, I can say nature's wondrous pageantry for that one. But it can stand a little bit of shade, but it's one of the ones that's fairly drought tolerant and can stand dry conditions.
Excellent. And I think most people call these coneflowers black-eyed Susans.
There's the rudbeckias, yep.
Yep, yeah. Nice color combination. That's an unusual mandevilla. They're usually red or white. So thanks to Gladys as always. Thank you, Elizabeth. You get the next picture question, Michael. This is a Meadow Grove, Nebraska viewer. And she is wondering how to get rid of blister beetles on tomato plants.
Well, they do like tomato plants and other things in that family, as well as legumes. As far as getting rid of them, I don't know if she has one or two or a lot. What some people will do is they'll just put a glove on. If there's one or two, they'll pick them up and throw them away. The reason they'll put the glove on, there's a reason they're called blister beetles. They have a substance in them called cantharidin, and it can cause some skin irritation and some blistering. If there's a whole bunch, people will just kind of knock them off, and in severe cases, some people will spray for them.
Okay, excellent. Rock, this is a Broken Bow viewer and has a couple of these things growing in his garden. Doesn't think he's seen them before. And actually these are spreading all over the place. So what do we think this is? The knotweed?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We talked about this before
Shallow.
the show.
And actually this is Omaha. So this is the central Omaha.
Okay, that
viewer.
threw me off because we had talked
Yeah.
about this earlier, but I was
Right.
thinking of the. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I'm stumbling through this answer.
Weeds.
It's so there's Japanese knotweed, which is noxious and it can get Amazon heights, and then you've got prostrate knotweed, which is an annual and it's a common weed, and then there's this sort of intermediate-sized one, doesn't get very big, has the kind of pinkish flower on it, and it's going to behave a lot like the knotweeds, which tend to be fairly invasive. So you want to get them pulled out of there or get them controlled in some way. The flower is kind of cute on them, but it's one of those ones that if it's not gonna, you're not gonna like it when it takes over the entire bed.
Right, yeah, I've seen it almost as a ground cover in that, that little low one. And the big one is actually an invasive weed.
And there's also the Pennsylvania smartweed, which is
About
it's got flowers
30
like that too in that
inches.
same family.
Right, lots of those guys. All right, thank you, Rock. Jeff, this viewer has 15 spruces planted this spring. They were B&B trees. Sounds like they maybe got planted right, but they're thinking it's a combination of spider mites and needle cast with the pinking in there. They've done copper fungicide treatments. They've also fertilized and they've washed the trees. So, any notions on?
So they're trying to take care of this.
Yeah.
Well, with Rhizophyra needle cast, I think what we'd want to use is a product that contains chlorothalonil. Am I pronouncing that right or close? Anyway, that's the kind of fungicide we want to use on that for the needle cast. And I don't know if we want to do a lot of pruning on those yet. Sanitation with these, clean up the needles around the base of the trees. I know Rock was talking about spraying. I think we want to try to reduce our competition, make sure that we're not overhead irrigating with these either. So sanitation, check out the fungicide, and making sure that we're improving our growing conditions.
All right, and the ones that are really brownish are probably
They probably are, yeah. Right. If they've lost most of their needles, then yeah,
toast.
yeah.
Kim, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but Jeff jogged my memory. So on the roundup at the base of trees for the suckers, if you have a colored bark, like red twig dogwood, I should have remembered this. It can translocate in colored bark trees, and then also if you have a cut, like you've been overly ambitious with the weed eater or something, if you've got a cut part of the stem, then it will move in and then you can cause some damage. So just keep those in mind. You got to be cautious, but it'll work.
All right, thanks, guys. Elizabeth, this viewer got an autumn blaze maple attacked by that strange windstorm, and it's pretty close to the house, and it's also pretty tall and gives them a lot of shade. He's wondering whether he can save it.
The hard part is once the tree loses a major leader like that, it's going to be difficult for that tree to come back to where it once was. And unfortunately, Autumn Blaze is a cross between a silver and a red maple. So it has that silver maple in it, which is known for fast-growing, weak wood. And so if it's right near the house, your best bet is to think about a replacement tree. Is a nice way to put it, because that overall tree has been compromised. So you're probably going to want to eventually take it out and start over with a new tree just for safety.
I think I'd be getting that chainsaw out right away on that
Yep,
one.
yep.
Well, our agriculture and horticulture demonstration landscape at Raising Nebraska Outdoors in Grand Island are starting to come together. Earlier in the season, we showed you the prairie installation and the construction of a pivot system. Right now, we'd like to show you a few of the new trees we planted recently. At Raising Nebraska Outdoors, one of the things that is going to be really important is to demonstrate how to purchase, how to plant, and how to grow really high quality trees. We're really fortunate in that we were able to get trees from vendors who actually know how to grow them and grow them well. Almost every single one that we are going to be planting is one that is in a root trapper or a root maker bag. And what that means is that they have created an excellent root system. They will establish much more easily, especially in these kind of destroyed construction soils. And as you can see from this oak, they have really good top growth, beautiful foliage. They're in proportion with one another. We have gotten a great diversity of trees in this location. And again, that is on purpose. We want to be able to demonstrate to people both what is possible, as well as to be able to, in the future, avoid some of those diseases that really devastate everything. If we would plant a monoculture of all the same trees and an insect or a pest hit it, we would be without a canopy at Raising Nebraska in the future. I've chosen tree species that are native in most cases, and you'll notice beautiful things like this black oak. If it's native to the environment in which we're going to place it, or at least close, it stands a fighting chance. So the high quality plus native should give us great canopy at Raising Nebraska. We have a lot of oaks, various species. People think they're slow growing. They aren't slow growing at all, as you can see by this one. We have an American elm, a sycamore. In our sort of wetland area or our soggier soils, we have the trees that you would typically see in a floodplain. And that includes catalpa buttonbush as a shrub and silky dogwood. With all the interest people are showing in growing their own fruits and vegetables at home, we had to have an orchard out here at Raising Nebraska Outdoors. We have apples, pears, peaches, plums, nectarines, and cherries, all of those great fruits that you might be able to grow at home in your own landscape. We're going to be demonstrating best practices in terms of planting, good nursery stock, as I said before. We'll also be demonstrating pruning, watering, pest and disease control, perhaps fruit thinning. We'll just have to see how it goes. Those are the really important things to know about growing your own fruits in your own home orchard or your own home landscape. We'll be putting in a lot of trees that will get a wide-spreading canopy, those oaks, cottonwoods, elms, the sycamore. On occasion in a landscape, we need something that looks like an exclamation point. This would be one of our native hackberries, but it's obviously a different selection, one called Prairie Sentinel. Narrow branching structure, all the other attributes of a hackberry, including the fact that it wants to live in Nebraska. It probably is more of a workhorse than a show horse, gets those nice warty galls that we get questions about, but it will give us that exclamation point in the landscape and really be a good addition to Raising Nebraska Outdoors. You know, that soil was as hard as a rock in some places. Elizabeth can attest to that, but with some help from volunteers and some soil amendment, the trees hopefully will respond pretty nicely. Those gardens should be a wonderful educational experience this year and in coming years out in Grand Island. Don't forget to join us as we tape our final program at the Nebraska Building on September 2nd. That should be a lot of fun to do. We get to eat fried things on a stick, too. That's always the best part. Okay, Michael, your last picture question would be, please tell me what these beasts are that ate all the leaves off of her little tricolor beech, and then does the tree have a chance to survive? What controls them? Those are beautiful and clearly hungry.
Very hungry. These look to be walnut caterpillars or walnut moth caterpillars. They are very gregarious, as you can tell. I'm not familiar with them really being a problem on beech, however. Birch, yes, and a lot of other things, but beech is kind of an unusual host for them. Controlling them at this point in time, they've kind of eaten themselves out of house and home. And going to the second part of that question, will the tree survive? I don't know how young the tree is. If it's very young, it could be too defoliated. And Elizabeth, I think, what's your thought?
I think you're right on. I think if it's really defoliated, which I'm probably sure that's what they did, if it's a small tree, you can leave it in and try and see if it survives through the winter. But my guess is it probably is going to have a hard go this winter.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, Rock, my bad on that last one. Now we're in Broken Bow.
Okay.
2 of these growing in the garden with that weird leaf. He doesn't think he's seen them before and wonders if it's a weed or a desirable plant.
It's a gallium, which is the bedstraw family. And some of you are probably familiar with the catchweed bedstraw that'll stick to you and has a tackiness to it. This one actually does not have one, and it's I can't remember the species name, but it's not overly aggressive, but it does produce a lot of seed. And I'm going to say it's undesirable. So let's rogue it out.
Yeah.
And I think common name on that one, I think, is called carpetweed.
Carpetweed. There you go.
No, that's not a Maluga.
not
No,
carpetweed?
that's not carpetweed.
Not okay.
No. Okay. All righty. But it's a weed.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, we had about, 8 million questions about crab apples again.
Okay.
2 or 3 in particular about sergeant crab. And this has been going on in one of them, and then, the branches die, and then they just sort of stop dying.
Right.
So they're wondering, is it fire blight, or what is it exactly? And then they're seeing these lesion dealy bobs going on.
Yeah, crab apples, sergeants are one of our more resistant crab apples to all the diseases. However, most crab apples are going to have some susceptibility to fire blight. That's showing some of those symptoms. It could be environmental from the weather that we had earlier this year, so we could have some root damage in there, and that's why we've lost some branches. My suggestion would be to be on the safe side. Go ahead and prune the dead branches out. Make sure that you're cleaning your pruners or your loppers when you're doing that. So it's like a 1 part of 10 parts Clorox when you're cleaning your pruning equipment. So anyway, I would get all the dead out of the plants right now and then kind of see what happens with this. If it continues to spread, if next spring we have the same sort of issues, then it probably is something like fire blight.
Okay, and you actually saved the ones on campus, right? I mean, that
Right.
so
yeah,
far.
we've cleaned out the dead. We have sergeants doing the same sort of thing.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Elizabeth, this is, we don't know, carney. Plant with waxy leaves about 3 feet tall. She wonders how to get rid of it in her garden and what it is.
What it is it's a weed called snow on the mountain, or Euphorbia marginata. So it's in the Euphorbiaceae family. It's got that milky sap to it. We were talking off air, and it's extremely hard to try to get rid of, especially in landscape beds. Jeff told me there's a couple of herbicides that you can use that were recommended, one of which is Tordon, and one of which is strong Roundup. The kicker with Tordon is it can stay in the soil profile for a while, and so if it's in your garden area, you probably want to steer clear of that. So we're looking at pulling it out. If you can, as you see it come up, just pull it out. It's fairly easy to pull. It will produce quite a few seeds, so that's something to be on the lookout for, but you can spray it. But like I said, I'd just pull it out if you're seeing just a few of them.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. Michael, we have a Logan, Iowa viewer. They have a peach tree loaded with fruit, starting to drop the fruit, and then there are white worms inside the developing fruit, and the peaches rot from the center out. What is that?
It could be a couple of different insects, depending on how big the worms are. The first thought, if they're really small, it could be some type of a fly maggot that's been attracted to the fermenting or overripe fruit because it's fallen to the ground. There are some caterpillars that could have gone into it as well, that from the eggs that would have been laid at the top of the stem. Without seeing it, it's one of those two probably.
Okay, and nothing they can do.
Not at this point in time. Once it's inside, it's too late.
All right. Rock, we have a Craig, Nebraska viewer wondering when is the best time to start planting new turf.
I'm going to say we never like to see it go into the ground before late August. And if it's fescue, you want to get it in about a 3 to 4 week window. So it should give you plenty of time. So maybe second or third week in August, you aerate and then let the soil, water it up, throw some seed down, drag it into the holes, walk away.
Okay. Okay, this is probably not pathology, but I'm going to give it to you anyway.
Okay.
This is a Western, Nebraska viewer.
Okay.
They have celebrity tomatoes 4 to 5 feet tall in big oak cages, and I'm giving this to you because you grow things like this.
Okay.
But they say the stems are bent and kind of contorted. They're not seeing insects or blight. They're wondering if you've had that sort of experience, or is there anything that could cause that that's pathological, short of overweight?
Yeah, I don't know. So are they full of fruit? Are they flowering and all that?
It says they're healthy. Doesn't say a whole lot about how
Okay.
much fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're back to possible herbicide damage. That would be kind of, if they're bent and contorted, that would be one of my
But
thoughts.
only on the newer ones, right?
Right.
If any of the
Yeah.
others are, then it's probably something else, right?
Right. So I don't know.
Who knows? Send
Yeah.
us a
Send a picture.
Picture?
Yeah.
Okay. Elizabeth, this is a Clarkson viewer. 3 clematis, east side of the house, and only one is flowering, and they're wondering how to get them to flower better.
With the clematis, I know they like to have their head in the sun, their feet in the shade. So that would be something to keep in mind. Are those roots shaded so they're not getting too hot? Also, I'd take a look at, what's your fertilizer, what's the watering, all those cultural practices, what are those doing? Because that's going to play a big role in that too. But it's going to be that environment first and check on that one to make sure all of them are happy, and then take a look at those cultural practices.
All right, and they didn't tell us how old they are. It can take a while for clematis to get old enough to flower. So, well, we have one announcement of a cool thing going on in the gardening world, and that would be us. Backyard Farmer at State Fair, Wednesday, September 2nd from 4 to 5, which is going to be the taped show that'll air on the 3rd, and we will also be there at 1 o'clock to do our usual Q&A after we have eaten our fried things on a stick. So that's always a lot of fun. You get a double dip of Backyard Farmer at the fair this year. All right, Michael, a question for you. This is an Auburn viewer. 1/2-inch long worms, brown, all over the front steps in the morning. What might those be? 1/2-inch brown worms.
It's possible they could be millipedes. We've had lots of questions this year about millipedes, and they're moving out of the grass towards structures a lot of times. You can put a boundary spray around the house if it is millipedes, such as a synthetic pyrethroid. Those kind of chemistries do a very good job of controlling them, but I hate to tell people to do that without knowing for sure that's what it is. We've had those kind of questions, but we don't know for sure that it's a millipede, but that's a good guess at this point in time.
All right, thank you, Michael. Rock, Stromsburg viewer wants to know about the best time to spray for clover in a fescue lawn.
Any of the perennial broadleaf weeds are best controlled in the fall. And if you've got something that's really hard to control, then you probably put the first spray down in mid to late September, then the second one down 4 to 6 weeks later if needed. But that's the best time to control perennial broadleaf weeds.
All right, thank you, Rock. Jeff, an Omaha viewer, oaks, 3 years old, or they've been planted for 3 years anyway. The ends of the branches are looking a little bit discolored and brownish, but they didn't wilt. They're not chewed on, and it's not oak wilt, and they're wondering, could it be environmental? We don't know neighborhood, we don't
Right,
know
so
location.
you're saying the leaves are kind of brownish.
Yeah.
This time of year, that's very common. I think with the weather that we've had and with the hot weather and the high humidity, it's not surprising to see that sort of thing. What they'll probably be seeing here very soon, once things cool off, is a new flush of growth. I'm starting to see that in some places on campus. Some plants that were looking a little tough are starting to push some new leaves. So I would suspect if they're patient, again, kind of those cultural things that we talk about, keep doing those, they'll probably snap out of it.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Elizabeth, we have an Omaha viewer wonders about pruning holly, and it sounds like it's probably the broadleaf holly. When would you do that, the broadleaf evergreen one?
You know, I'd wait till spring, and then you see what you have in terms of winter kill or winter desiccation, and that's going to give you a better idea. You know, I'd hate for you to prune them this fall, and then we get a hard winter, and then you'll notice dieback in the plants themselves. So wait till spring, know what kind of damage you have in those broadleaf evergreens.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Michael, the last question of the night. This is a Wahoo viewer who has little black insects on their strawberries, half the size of an ant, and they're eating the strawberries.
Well, I'm not sure half the size of what size of ant. If it's a black carpenter ant, they're half that size. It could be strawberry root weevil. We've had some of those come into the office, but it could be something else as well. Without the picture, it's really hard to say. It's a good guess, but I'm not sure that's what it is.
All right, send us a picture and don't spray it, or if you're going to spray it, don't eat the strawberries.